Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bull Take Scouting Podcast. Today, we'll be going around some of the hot topics in the NFL and in college football. And the hottest topic right now is the Deshaun Watson trade talks, which are intensifying by the day ahead of Tuesday's NFL trade deadline. I'm just going to give a couple of the reports that have come out about this situation. Andy Holloway has said that Deshaun Watson will be traded this week and play almost immediately for his new team. He's 95% confident we will see him move this week. With Tuesday's deadline, he's 90% sure he will be able to play while his legal situation works out. He lists Miami as the huge favorite, which has been echoed around the league, but also lists Denver, Carolina, and Philadelphia as other options. And we've heard from Josina Anderson and other sources in the past day that although Watson would love to go to Miami and they are the favorite, he would be open to several other options also. So I'm going to start off with this. Do you think that, like all this buzz is amounting to, we will end up seeing Deshaun Watson traded in the next week?
I think you have to. I think, there's too much information out there that's saying he will. I don't really think I've heard anyone that said otherwise. Maybe a couple weeks ago we heard a lot of people say no, it's false rumors. I know a few weeks ago Ian Rappaport was on the Pat McAfee show and he said that he didn't think it was going to happen. But again, that was a few weeks ago before we heard all this. So I think a lot has really changed with information coming out. So, in short, I do think he's going to be traded before the trade deadline.
I would lean towards him being traded. I'm not as certain as you are and not as certain as the general public is. I think that even though if a team trades for him, they're either very confident in his legal situation working out in his favor, or they are going to include a clause in the trade where if he's found guilty of the many sexual assault allegations against him, the trade gets nullified. I just think that it is a big hurdle. And when you're talking about NFL trades, that's already something that's very difficult and it involves a lot of logistics, especially some of these blockbuster trades. We don't see them that often for good reason. So I think that makes it even more complicated. And this is an in-season trade on top of that. So I would say with my intuition that we're looking at maybe a 70% chance instead of a 95% like Andy Holloway is saying.
Yeah, I think, touching on, possible terms of the deal, from what I've heard and what I've read is that there has to be some kind of something written out where if he is, found guilty and suspended by the league for whatever, a season, who knows how long, that the terms of the deal will either be, lessened, less draft picks, or, maybe the deal gets nullified entirely. I don't know how all of that works out, but there are definitely things in place where if it does go wrong, that teams won't be giving up multiple first round picks to never have Deshaun Watson play for them.
Yeah, and I think we can look at some of the potential trade destinations. And first, I just want to say that if I was an owner, I wouldn't be signing off on a Deshaun Watson trade. I think that culture is one of the biggest things that goes towards winning a Super Bowl. And I just wouldn't want the man in charge of my football team, of my offense, the quarterback at the helm, to be someone that has that kind of those kind of allegations against him. Because when you look at just how many of them there are, when you look at a couple of the testimonies that have surfaced of some of the women, it's heart-wrenching. And I don't know what the legal outcome will be. There's no way to know for certain what actually happened and what didn't, but just it's a very serious situation, and I wouldn't want to have that person as my quarterback. And I'll let you say a word on that if you want before we dive into this.
I mean, I second what you said. I think I would not make a move until everything is kind of all cleared up. Obviously, that would probably be too late in the NFL landscape, but I would have to see how everything plays out before I make a move. And, we haven't really heard Watson say anything about it. I want to know that he truly is remorseful and, a changed person.
Yeah. And so now let's just hypothetically dive into this in terms of looking at the perspectives, Houston's perspective, the perspective of the teams that are interested in. Miami has been the overwhelming favorite. And what I think is a big bonus for Miami's case in this is that while they only have one first round pick compared to, let's say, Philadelphia, it's not their own first round pick. And that's big because when you're acquiring Deshaun Watson, you're acquiring a quarterback who's going to make your team a lot better. Deshaun Watson is a top 5 quarterback in this league, in my opinion. And I believe that the draft position of the team that acquires him will just become a lot worse once the season ends, even though he's joining mid-season. And in Miami's case, they don't own their first round pick. The Philadelphia Eagles own it, and Miami owns San Francisco's first round pick. So if that's the pick that they're sending from this year in the potential package, it wouldn't be affected by their performance with Watson the rest of the season.
That's a great point that I didn't even really think about. That, obviously with a Deshaun Watson trade, the pick is going to be higher, or the pick's going to be lower in the first round. So, that's something Houston has to keep in mind. And I think we'll touch on that a little bit later when we talk about Houston's perspective. But, that's a great point that it is San Francisco's pick, and San Francisco's record and draft pick and ranking will not be affected if Miami trades for Deshaun Watson. And next year, Miami has their own first round pick and San Francisco's first round pick again. So Houston would be getting 2 first round picks from San Francisco that, again, would not be affected if Deshaun Watson is traded to Miami. So I think that's a great point that you made.
Yeah, and then there's after looking at the logistics like we just have, there's just the situation on whether or not you're ready to move on from Tua Tagovailoa, and I think it's really difficult to assess that. If hypothetically I was willing to sign off on a Deshaun Watson trade with the draft capital the Dolphins have, I would lean towards going in that situation and trading for Deshaun Watson. That doesn't mean that I'm a non-believer in Tua Tagovailoa. I just think when you look especially at his injury history throughout college and now in the NFL so far, he just doesn't have the consistent availability over the last few years to make him a franchise quarterback. And so that goes beyond his level of play, which has been pretty much at a level where we can't really tell yet. So I think that the injury concern surrounding Tua would push that over the edge for me. And then the other team that I think that would be really likely out of these 4 that were mentioned earlier are the Philadelphia Eagles, because they likely have 3 first-round picks, including Miami's and Indianapolis's. So that could end up being 2 top 10 picks, maybe 2 top 15 picks, and a mid to late first-round pick that would be their own if they got Watson and greatly improve their performance. So they 100% have the draft capital, and I would not have, if I were signing off on this again, I would say that they should move on from Jalen Hurts and complete this trade.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is, again, 2 of those picks aren't their own, and one is Miami's. Yep. So, if Miami keeps trending the direction they're going, they're probably going to have a high first-round pick that is going to go to Philadelphia that Houston would get if Deshaun Watson was traded to Philadelphia. Though I completely agree that they should move on from Jalen Hurts. I don't think he ever should have, had the opportunity to be a franchise quarterback, just because I don't think he was going to ever be one. So I think that, regardless of if they trade for Deshaun Watson, Philadelphia will be in the quarterback market next offseason. The interesting thing that kind of concerns me with Philadelphia is the Philadelphia media. We know, how ruthless they can be, and I'm not sure how they would react to Deshaun Watson being the quarterback in Philadelphia. So that kind of makes me a little bit wary of, maybe does Deshaun Watson want to be there and be scrutinized by that Philadelphia media?
Yeah, I agree about that. But I think right now he's just really focused on getting out of Houston. And so the other 2 teams that were mentioned were the Denver Broncos and the Carolina Panthers. And while both of those would make sense in terms of not having a franchise quarterback currently, we know the Broncos don't. They have Teddy Bridgewater currently, and Drew Lock has been a failed mission there. And then Carolina actually pulled Sam Darnold from the game and put in P.J. Walker against the Giants this weekend. It's just seeming like Darnold is not the long-term answer there. So both of them don't have a franchise quarterback and would have that motivation to trade for Watson. But with 1 first-round pick, and compared to what Miami and Philadelphia can offer, and especially considering that Denver and Carolina, it's their own first-round pick, so that would be worsening if they acquired Watson and became a better team. I just don't think they could compete. So at the end of the day, I think that to sum it up, I'd give it about a 70% chance that it happens. And I think that we are right to consider Miami the favorite. I think they're definitely the leader in the clubhouse, but I would also watch out for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I think Miami was the favorite for so long because we knew Watson would sign off on Miami, and it was rumored that he wouldn't sign off on Philadelphia. I think now that, he's rumored to sign off on pretty much anywhere, I think Philadelphia should be much stronger of an option in the general public sense than I think they really are being considered. I think it's still really Miami is kind of a one-man show in the general public, but I think, again, because Watson is seemingly willing to sign off on Philadelphia, I would not be surprised at all if Philadelphia makes a move for him.
Yep. And before we move on, I know you wanted to talk about how this deal changes in terms of happening right now and how it would happen in the next offseason in terms of what teams would give up, what Houston would be getting, and thus that would impact how willing they are to do the trade right now. So what do you have to tell us about that?
So what something that I've been reading and also thinking about on my own is if I was Houston, Watson obviously wants to be out right now, but you still have complete control over Deshaun Watson. I would wait until the end of the season, and there's a few reasons why. First of all, you know what picks you're getting in the first round. I mean, you can kind of assume with how teams are doing this first half of the season, but you never really know. What if Philadelphia's picks, all three of those picks end up being, 12 and lower for some weird reason? Then you're Houston. I mean, sure, you have 3 first-round picks, but I'd really want a high first-round pick, top 5, so you don't really have to use those other picks to trade up for a quarterback. So that's one reason. Also, a lot of people's opinions is Houston will get more for Deshaun Watson if they trade him in the offseason versus if they trade him now, just because there will be more teams in the running for the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes when the season is over, because there's still some teams, maybe in limbo about their quarterback. Think about, maybe the New Orleans Saints. If anyone said, would you trade for Deshaun Watson right now? I'm pretty sure they would probably lean on the side of no. What if Jameis Winston stinks it up the second half of the season? Then they're much more likely to be in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. So you have to look at it of there's still some teams in QB limbo. Right now, they wouldn't make a move because their quarterback could either go up or down. At the end of the season, all these teams will know if their quarterback is the guy they want to stick with or a guy they want to move on from. And the more teams you have that have a quarterback they want to move on from, the more teams you're going to have in the sweepstakes. And then Houston's going to get more in return for Watson.
I agree with you. I think that a lot of this buzz right now is being generated because there are certain teams that are trying to save their season, certain general managers and head coaches that are trying to save their jobs, like what is going on in Miami because of how poorly they've started the season. And I think that if you look at it from Houston's perspective, there's just not much reason to complete the trade right now. They would really get more in the offseason. They'd have a better look at what draft capital they'd be receiving and at who the potential suitors are to be able to weigh all their options. So I think that that's an interesting aspect to consider, and that's why maybe the trade's a little less likely than people are saying. But I think we've exhausted this topic. We'll see whether or not it happens, and it's certainly going to be an interesting week ahead in the Deshaun Watson case to see whether or not he ends up on a new team.
Yeah, totally. And if that happens within the next week, I'm sure we'll be talking about it first thing in next week's podcast. Moving on now, talk about Zach Wilson's injury a little bit. Obviously, if you didn't know, Zach Wilson has a PCL strain. He's out 2 to 4 weeks. The Jets, after that happened, traded for Joe Flacco on Monday night with the Philadelphia Eagles. They're giving up a conditional sixth round pick. And Kosta, what are your thoughts on this whole situation?
I think that it's unfortunate for Wilson to get hurt. Obviously, I'm not going to say that's a great thing for him, but there's certain benefits that you could see in this. I think that he's been a little overwhelmed by the speed of the game and the talent of opposing defenses and of defensive coordinators in the NFL. And while we initially thought that Mike White would be filling in for the Jets as he did in the first game that Wilson went down against New England, they ended up trading for Joe Flacco. And while Joe Flacco has made it clear several times, including with the Broncos, and with the Eagles that his role is not to be the mentor to the young guy, it does still regardless give Zach Wilson the opportunity to sit on the sidelines for a few weeks, observe a very experienced veteran quarterback play the position, see the game in the regular season from the sideline, which he hasn't had a chance to do, and observe again a veteran quarterback who has a lot of experience and has been very successful in this league, how he goes about being a quarterback in the National Football League. So I think that there could be some benefits. You just hope that this injury will not be the start of a trend for Zach Wilson, given that he does have kind of a slight frame compared to some other NFL quarterbacks. So hopefully he recovers quickly. He benefits from having been on the sideline, observing Flacco play for a few weeks, and he comes back a better quarterback.
Yeah, obviously, as a Jets fan, I don't want to see Zach Wilson get injured. I don't think I'm hoping it's not a trend. He did get hit below the knee 2 plays before he got injured. So I'm sure, those 2 hits in succession were not great at all for him. But, like you said, I'm hoping that, the game has been fast for him these past 6 weeks. I'm hoping sitting on the sideline will give him time to really observe how to go about, like you said, being an NFL quarterback, how to go about game week, preparing for a game. And I think this is something the Jets should have done this offseason. They have a rookie head coach, a rookie offensive coordinator, no veteran quarterback. So, no one to really mentor Zach Wilson and how to be an NFL quarterback. Mike LaFleur, again, he was, with San Francisco under Kyle Shanahan, but he didn't call any plays. He's still learning the ropes. Robert Saleh, again, rookie head coach, still learning the ropes. Zach Wilson definitely learning the ropes as a rookie quarterback coming in from a lesser conference in college. So I think, this really could be beneficial for him. Take a few weeks, watch how everything goes, watch how Joe Flacco goes about his week. I've heard before that, sometimes sitting a few weeks throughout the season has helped rookie quarterbacks, younger quarterbacks, just learn how to play the position as a professional. So I'm hoping this will help him slow down his brain a little bit. And hopefully he comes back in a couple weeks ready to go.
Yes, and above else, I hope for him that he'll be able to stay healthy beyond this. And so let's shift gears to talk some college football. And there was one of the craziest games that we have ever seen in college football history this weekend, and it ended up being the longest game in FBS history. And it was the Illinois versus Penn State game. Illinois won 28-18 after 9 overtimes. And if you're not familiar with how college football overtime works, after 2 overtimes, it starts to be alternating 2-point conversions that work in sudden death, so that if one team makes their 2-point conversion and the other team doesn't, the game ends. But this didn't happen until the 9th overtime, and as a matter of fact, neither team made a 2-point conversion until the 8th overtime. And both teams made it in the 8th, and Illinois made it in the 9th, while Penn State didn't. So Illinois took home the win. And I mean, this was a crazy game. What are some of your initial thoughts on how it played out and just what it means for both these teams?
But it was crazy, especially to see Illinois, that was, not a very good team coming in, had quite a few tough losses. And Penn State, that, they had their tough loss versus Iowa, but they were looking like a really good team. Maybe if they won out, potential to be in the college football playoffs, and this really kills their hopes. I mean, you are not getting in the college football playoffs with 2 losses. Nonetheless, 1 to Illinois, that's going to be unranked throughout the season. So, really tough loss for Penn State in a game they really had no business losing. But, I mean, great win for Illinois. Sometimes when you're having a tough season, a win like this can really, get you into gear, give your team a lot of momentum heading down the stretch, and, hopefully they can rattle off a few more wins to end the season strong.
Yeah, and I think that, as you said, it definitively closes the door on Penn State's playoff hopes in a really tough Big Ten. And after this, we'll get into talking about the Big Ten title race. But as I've been checking the scores throughout the season for Illinois, I haven't managed to watch any of their games up until now. I was reminded of the conversation we had with their left tackle, Vidarian Lowe, this offseason, who is a 2022 NFL draft prospect. And he unfortunately had to leave the game with an injury. So we hope that he'll have a speedy recovery. But he was talking about how much of a culture change happened this offseason as new coach Brett Bielema came in, and how they've just gotten a lot better as a team. He's teaching them a lot of things that they haven't learned so far in their football careers. And I was surprised to see them struggle this much up until now in the season. And so I do like to see that they've come off with a signature win, and maybe things are going to get better, but it should be a reflection of some of the strides they did make as a program this offseason. But I want to talk about how we think about college overtime rules versus NFL rules, because it's completely different. I mean, this 2-point conversion system that kicks in the third overtime is very different than in the NFL, where the first team to score a touchdown wins, and you typically don't end up going even towards the end of overtime. So what are your thoughts on which method you prefer better?
How about I don't really like either? I wish we could have a mix of the two. I think that would be the best of both worlds. To start off with college, I liked what college did before the change this year. I get that some games would go extremely long time-wise. Like you said, this was the longest college football game ever, but not in terms of how long the actual game was. It was in terms of how many overtimes it was. But I get that they want to shorten the overtime games, but I just thought the 2-point conversion thing is a little weird. Like, obviously you saw it's very hard to get a 2-point conversion. You're in goal line. It's always tough to score on the goal line. So I get that they didn't want to do something super easy, but I just think it's weird when you have one play on offense, one play on defense going back and forth. I think maybe an idea could be, after the first 2 overtimes, obviously maybe you don't want to start from the 25. What if they moved it up to the 10 and you had 4 downs, score a touchdown, kick a field goal, the other team has 4 downs. Maybe you can't kick a field goal because it would almost be a gimme every time, even in college. So you have 4 downs, score a touchdown from the 10. I just think the 2's a little weird. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't hate it. As a soccer fan, it reminds me of a penalty shootout, and every soccer fan knows that a penalty shootout is imperfect, and it really doesn't represent who was the better team throughout the game, but it's been commonly accepted for decades and decades, and has produced a lot of great outcomes to a lot of major tournaments. And I just think that it's definitely an interesting option to have this 2-point conversion kick in at the end of 2 overtimes. And to keep the soccer analogy going, it likens the 2 overtime periods to the 2 overtime halves that you have in soccer, and then the 2-point conversion alternations to a penalty kick shootout. And I don't think it's one of the worst options. As you said, it's a little weird to see it from the 2, and maybe they could back it up a little bit so it's not almost fluky, but it's definitely better than the NFL for me. I hate the weight that the coin toss holds in an NFL overtime, because it's just not fair to me that if a team wins the coin toss, chooses to receive the ball, and goes and scores a touchdown, that the other team doesn't even get a chance to respond. So I think that alone makes the college rules better. But I'd definitely like to see the NFL overtime rules evolve.
I don't see why we can't say we've shortened the overtime to 10 minutes already. Why can't we say for the NFL, you have 10 minutes? If somebody comes out on top at the end of those 10 minutes, you win. It doesn't matter who scores first. It doesn't matter who gets the ball first. And I think, maybe 20, 25 years ago, the coin toss didn't play a big part in that, because offenses and defenses were so balanced. Now the game has been skewed so much toward offense because of rule changes, whatever, scoring 50 points gets more views than scoring 10 and winning, So obviously it's better for money-wise to have better offenses, so the game has shifted towards that. But, it's really made NFL overtime unfair.
Yeah, just one note on that. I don't like the idea of just having 10 minutes and whatever the final score at the end is final score, because that would result in too many ties. Nobody likes ties. Nobody likes seeing the 1 as a third number in the record. It makes just thinking about playoff chances and everything a little difficult. It leaves a weird feeling at the end of the game when you've played that long and it's a tie. It's just, ties aren't a big thing in football. I don't think we want to increase the number of ties. But to get to our last topic before we have to come off the air, the Big Ten has been absolutely wide open. So we just saw Penn State drop out of the top 10 of the AP rankings, but there are still 4 teams that are in the top 10. Ohio State comes in at 5, Michigan at 6, Michigan State at 8, Iowa at 9. and there's Michigan, Michigan State on Saturday. So I'm just going to put you on the spot here. Who do you think comes out on top between those two teams?
I'm going to go with Michigan.
Yeah.
I think, I think they've had some good recruiting classes. I think, Jim Harbaugh, he's had a rough few seasons there at Michigan. I think it's time he finally turns the program around to what everyone was expecting Michigan to be.
Yeah, and now a lot of people are looking at how good Michigan has been, and I think they are a very good team, and I would agree with you that they're going to beat Michigan State this week. But I just don't think this is the year they beat Ohio State. As much as Michigan fans want to do it, I think this is still Ohio State's conference to win. I think that we've seen C.J. Stroud improve a lot in the last 3 games with a 14-0 touchdown to interception ratio over that span, and we know the talent that he has surrounding him. Chock full of future NFL draft picks. The defense also has that level of talent. So I think Ohio State's going to win out. They're going to beat both Michigan State and Michigan the remainder of the regular season, and they're going to win the Big Ten championship to make the playoff. But it's really nice to see the Big Ten this wide open, and it's gonna come out to have some really exciting games. That Michigan-Ohio State game is definitely going to be close, even though I think that Ohio State's going to win it. And just leading up to it, it's going to be one of the most highly anticipated Big Ten regular season games in years now.
Oh, 100%. And, a few last points before we have to hang up for the night. I think, whatever ends up happening with the Big Ten, whoever wins that Big Ten championship deserves to be in the college football playoffs, whether it's Iowa, Michigan State, Michigan, or Ohio State. None of them are in the top 4 right now, but whoever ends out winning this whole gauntlet, even, with a loss maybe, they deserve to be in the college football playoffs. I would argue that it's probably the best conference in college football. SEC fans may disagree. They could say we have Georgia and Alabama and Arkansas and Ole Miss, but I mean, four teams in the top 10 more than halfway through the season, that's hard to do.
Yeah, I think in general the SEC is better. This year, I think the Big Ten is better. And I'm going to second your point. There really has to be a Big Ten team in the college football playoff. Whoever comes out on top definitely deserves to be a top 4 team in the nation and get their chance at playing for a national title.
Yeah, I think that wraps us up for the night. Thanks everyone for listening, watching. We'll be back again next week with another episode.